All right, so the two main things that you need to pay attention to for this first assignment, the personal narrative, are your vivid details and your story structure. After 11 years of teaching this assignment, those are the two things that I've come up with are the most important for making sure that you have a good, clear, cohesive story. So those are the two things that we're going to pay attention to the most. So let's start with vivid details. When I say vivid detail, what I'm talking about is anytime that you give a specific name or number or adjective to one of the nouns in your story, right? So the difference between like my house and my house up on the hill, or the blue house with the red door, right? If you give extra adjectives or specific names, so right, the difference between a gun and a Glock 45, right? Adding those extra names or details makes something a vivid detail rather than just a noun in your story, right? So I'm going to give you an example right now of how that changes. Okay, so we're talking about like the difference between my car, which is just a vague noun, and then something else. So if we type in, let me just show you. If I type in car into Google Images, there's like sports cars, just icons of cars, kind of newer cars, regular looking cars. So if I say car, if I'm telling a story and it involves me going somewhere in a car, and I use the word car, then this is the kind of thing people will see. Regular cars, sports cars, police cars, race cars, anything like that, right? But if in my story I write instead a red 2005 Honda Civic Coupe EX or something like that, that's a vivid detail, right? So look, now that's the only thing that people can picture. There's only one thing. And so when you say red 2005 Honda Civic Coupe EX, there's only one thing we can picture, and so therefore we as the readers, we think this is important. I need to pay attention to this. If you just say car, then there's so much like fuzz around it, haze around it, that I don't know what to picture, and so I don't think it's important. So adding vivid details, specific names and things like that helps the reader know this is important. All right, so when you do that different detail, so the difference between a car and a 2005 Honda Civic Coupe EX, what you're doing is you're telling your audience that this is important. But the thing is, it's like you have to do it at the right time. When I say I want vivid details in a story, I don't mean every noun you give should have extra names or adjectives or numbers attached to them, right? Because what that does is it shows the audience this is important, pay attention to this. So you can't end up overusing it. So watch this scene that I just shot now to think about how this works in terms of like movies you've watched and stuff. And we'll see what a vivid detail looks like in terms of visual details. What's the news? There's a dinosaur wandering around Main Street eating people. We'll go get him. Let's get them. That's good enough. Okay, so in that scene, we see pay attention to the keys and the knife a lot, right? First thing we see that's like a vivid noun is this knife that gets open and you see it, and then it gets closed, and then the keys jingling coming up the stairs. But then ultimately the scene is about killing dinosaurs on Main Street, right? And so that knife then just kind of disappears and has nothing to do with the story, so you're left wondering like, well, what was the knife, or where does that have to do with anything, right? So the same thing happens in our writing when we overuse vivid details. This is what a lot of students end up doing, is they start their story by saying like, I woke up and my alarm clock, it was 5:35, and I put on my Hurley t-shirt and my this cap, some brand name cap, and tied my Vans shoes, right? So they start overloading us with vivid details, but then the story ends up being about like they had a fight with their mom or something like that. And so we don't want too many vivid details, otherwise, just like in that scene that we saw, we feel misled as the readers, right? So the details that we include need to point toward the story structure, right? So how do we know what is important? Well, we got to worry about the story structure. So, the story formula, as I'm going to call it in this class, story formula consists in 3 parts. At first I thought, which is where you talk about how you felt about that idea. So ultimately the story is about a change of mind. So in order for that to work, you have to explain where your mind was at first. At first I thought. And so you give us details that point to showing us how you thought about that thing, right? The second, you're going to give us lots of details in terms of a series of events that changed your mind about something. And then the third, which is usually the very shortest section of the story, is just where you tell us now what you think. And if you can give us more details to compare to that beginning part, then we can understand that you changed your mind. So the important thing is that first section, the at first I thought, and the third, and now I think, are direct opposites of each other. So one way that this won't work is if you like, at first I didn't want to go to camp, but then I went to camp and I met a lot of friends, right? If that's how your story ends, then it kind of feels unresolved, right? Because that first and that third don't really show a change, right? Or if you said, at first I was a bad person, but then I met this person and he really changed, or he helped me to learn about the gospel, and then I joined the church. Something like that, right? Those aren't exact opposites of each other, right? If you say, at first I thought that I didn't need religion in my life because I believed in whatever, and then I met this person and they taught me about these things, and now I could see why religion mattered in my life, and then show us that thing, right? Show us through vivid details how that's different, right? You got to use those vivid details to point to these 3 pieces of the structure. At first I thought, show us the vivid details about, what you thought about that. Then the vivid details about the chain of events that happen, and then the vivid details about how you changed your mind about it, right? So let's watch a video now. I'm going to watch it with you so we can start to point out these 3 sections of the story.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, so I'm in 4th grade, going to 5th grade, and it's the end of the summer, and I'm getting ready for school. And I got my school supplies, my school clothes, my super cool new lunchbox, the new J's on my feet, the new Jordan sneakers. I'm set. There's only really one thing I'm missing. And you know how like when you're a kid, you don't really care how your hair looks? Like you don't really take care of your hair. Like you don't really comb it or wash it. Or maybe that's just me.
All right, so that's the end of the first section.
At the end of the summer, my hair was kind of just like this thing on my head. And it was terrible. It was revolting. Like nobody wanted to look at it.
Okay, maybe right there.
And
that's the end of the first section.
So everywhere I'm going, my friends are like, yo, Alfonso, you need a haircut. My sister is telling me you need a haircut, My mom's kind of corny. She said, I'm going to get you a haircut before you go to school because you look like a fool. That's what she said.
So this is a series of events leading up to the change.
And so one day, and I'm kind of just like, yeah, I agree. I need a haircut. So one day, I go to my cousin's house, and it's my older cousin and my other cousin around my age. And so I'm sitting there, I'm playing video games with my other cousin around my age, and while I'm playing video games, I kind of notice my older cousin kind of staring at my hair. And all of a sudden he says, I could cut your hair right for free. And I'm like, really? Really? Because that'd be great. My mom's been she said I need a haircut before I go back to school, so this would be awesome. And so I didn't really know better. Like, nobody was there to say, stop! This guy is not a licensed barber. He's not qualified to cut hair. This is not what he does. It's just not. And so, my cousin takes me to the backyard, to the garage. And the garage is dark. And there's not really much light except for this old rusty lamp. And you know how like in the movies when they find some ancient artifact and there's the dust on it and they blow in it and the dust slides? That was that lamp. That was it. So my cousin, starts cutting my hair. There was no mirrors either, And you know how when you go to the barber shop there's those giant mirrors. So while you're getting your haircut, you could kind of look up and check, I like that. That's nice.
Lots of details.
So my hair for like 25, 30 minutes. And all of a sudden, he stops. And he's proud of his work. He's like, bang, there you go, I got you, little man. gives me a high five. Gotcha. And I get up, I'm like, okay, now I'm ready for school. I want to go play video games with my cousin now. And so I knew there was something wrong. Because as soon as I stepped foot into the house, my other cousin around my age looks at me and starts dying, crying, laughing all over the place, hysterically. And I like jokes, I want to know what's funny too. So I go to the bathroom and I come face to face with the mirror.
So we're still in that second section, the main chain of events,
I
right?
couldn't believe what I saw, guys. My hairline was back here. And this was all shining. Like I had like this windshield thing going on. Like if you look closely enough into my forehead, you can see your own reflection in it. It was crazy. It was just glistening. And I was kind of crazy when I was a kid. So I started bugging out all over the place. I'm screaming everywhere. Why? What am I going to do? Oh my God, cousin, why have you wronged me this way? How am I supposed to go to school? What am I going to do? So later on, I get dropped off at my house. And I see my mom. And she looks at me, and she kind of just like shrugs it off, She's like, oh, well, I told you I was going to get you a haircut. Should have waited, now you're going to look funny. And so that's what happened. I looked funny for the
Okay, so that's the series of events.
Laughed and made jokes. And I don't know if y'all can tell, I keeps it fresh now.
That's it. That's the change of mind right there. He tacks on this
So
other thing at the
basically,
end.
I trusted my cousin once, and I will never trust him again for anything.
Yeah. So the thing about him trusting his cousin, I don't really think is the point of the story. But yeah, so we got that first section. At first I thought that I didn't have to take care of my hair. And then he gives us this series of events of this bad haircut that happens. And at the end, I keeps it fresh. That's the change of mind, right? So the first section took, maybe this much of the story. Then the middle section, the chain of events, took up most of everything else. And then just that last little line at the end is all he needs to tell us about the change of mind. It keeps it fresh, right?
All right, okay, so we watched that video. So the at first I thought section, I pointed out to you when it ends, but all the vivid details that he gives us in that first section point toward at first I thought. So let's watch that.
I'm in 4th grade, going to 5th grade. And I got my school supplies, my school clothes, my super cool new lunchbox, the new J's on my feet, the new Jordan sneakers. My hair was kind of just like this thing on my head. So everywhere I'm going, my friends are like, yo, Alfonso, you need a haircut, My mom's kind of corny. She said, I'm going to get you a haircut before you go to school because you look like a fool. That's what she said.
Okay, then all the vivid details that he gives us in the second section all point toward this chain of events, this bad haircut that changed how he felt about not taking care of his hair. So let's watch those vivid details now.
So one day, I go to my cousin's house. And so I'm sitting there, I'm playing video games with my other cousin around my age, and all of a sudden he says, I could cut your hair right for free. And so my cousin takes me to the backyard, to the garage. And the garage is dark, and there's not really much light except for this old rusty lamp. And you know how like in the movies when they find some ancient artifact and there's the dust on it and they blow in it and the dust flies everywhere? That was that lamp. That was it. There was no mirrors either, So my cousins cut my hair for like 25, 30 minutes. Because as soon as I stepped foot into the house, my other cousin around my age looks at me and starts dying, crying, laughing all over the place, hysterically. I go to the bathroom. My hairline was back here. And this was all shining. Like I had like this windshield thing going on. So later on, I get dropped off at my house. And I see my mom, and she looks at me, and she kind of just like shrugs it off, She's like, oh, well, I told you I was going to get you a haircut. Should have waited, now you're going to look funny.
Okay, and then that ending, that third section, this works differently because he is giving a talk. So in order to give the vivid details, all he has to do is say, I keeps it fresh, right? Points to his hair. So he doesn't have to describe that, but we don't get to do that in writing. So if he were writing that, he would say, I have this nice fade, this expensive shirt, this cool necklace. He would have to explain it to us in words because we can't just look at him and see the vivid details of how he keeps it fresh now.
I don't know if y'all can tell. I keeps it fresh now.
It's not the best example to watch this video because it doesn't translate exactly into your writing. But the important thing is we got these two things, vivid details and story structure. So those vivid details point to the audience what is important. Pay attention to this, this matters. And the story structure tells us what things matter because we've got these three sections and each one has to get vivid details so that we can understand. How did you think about a certain thing? What are the chain of events that changed how you thought about that thing? And then what do you think now and how do we see that your mind is changed, right? So if we can handle those two things, the vivid details and the story structure, and make them work together, that's what's going to give us a cohesive story. So I hope that helps. Plus, that's what I'm going to be grading you on. If you go to the assignment sheet, you can see the sections. I'm going to be grading you on your use of vivid details, your use of story structure and how cohesive it is, and then the third section is just your overall language. Are you using college level spelling and grammar, all that kind of stuff. So that's how I'm going to be grading your paper. But those are the things that matter most when telling a story. That you've got this structure that points to a beginning, middle, and end, and you've got the vivid details that only point toward those three sections. If you've got extraneous vivid details, it feels like the keys and the knife in that scene that I showed you earlier. They just feel misleading. Okay, hope that helps. There we go.